Welcome back to Cade Sport, the platform that invites you to stop pedaling and start cycling, where you join us today live for another edge of your seat, chain grinding installment of a Pro Power race. My name is Mark and I am joined by Frank Garcia.
Hey Mark, how you doing today?
Good, thank you. How about yourself?
Very good, thank you.
Wonderful. And so, what race are we starting off on today, Frank?
We are on Cade Fondo for the start today. So long, flat, and no power-ups. So true cycling to start us off today.
Awesome. So we're going to see lots of endurance, hopefully some very vivid sprints off the front, and hopefully some attacks for chasing. It's going to be part of that edge of your seat dynamic that I was referring to. So why don't we take a look at how our riders, our caders, if you will, are warming up. So here we go, keeping the power nice and restrained, just getting those legs nice and massaged. A true sign that we have some pros out on the track today. So what do you think we can expect today to see out on the course, out on Cade Fondo today, Frank?
Well, I think it's it'll be interesting. We've got Kay and Homer out. Depending on how many miles they did yesterday, it'll be interesting to see how fresh they are today. They ride more than anybody I know, so sometimes they're a little bit fatigued. It'll be interesting to see how they come in today. We've got Pedro. I would expect Pedro to do very well today as well. And, you know, maybe Vanessa's got something in her legs today as well.
Vanessa's been really impressive recently, and very much, you know, bringing up the leaderboard, if you will, on the endurance races like this one, which has been fantastic to witness.
Yeah, what will also be interesting to sort of take in today is CCC, Kay and Homer versus Hive, Vibeke and Timothy. Timothy and Vibeke were getting very tight in their ability to ride together, but they haven't been riding together in the last week or two. So it'll be interesting to see if they're a little bit rusty or if they join right back in.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Timothy can hold off on sprinting to be able to draft Vibika along, and what that can do for the team dynamic there.
Yes, and I wonder if Vibica had a mechanical, because I don't see her out here at the moment. So that'll be interesting to see if that changed. I did see her in the lobby, but we'll have to see how that pretends. So Timothy seems to be waiting up. Maybe he's waiting up for Vibica to get on, and you can do that in this longer race. But you've got Homer and Kay off the front. Looks like Pedro's closing that down. Timothy about 5 seconds back, and Vanessa was there. Okay, so Vibica is back here a bit. She's going to have to get caught back on. Looks like maybe Vanessa is going to work with Team Hive today, because it looks like she's trying to bring that back in as well. So Vibica's not going hard here, so maybe she got on late and is trying to warm up. It's sort of interesting, but back here with a larger peloton with the bots.
And what's interesting is I actually saw Timothy dropping back there rather than Vibika getting out the saddle, pushing on those cranks to really get back to the pack. So clearly they've heard our commentary and they're looking at a team dynamic here. Now the bots, that's interesting, they're forming an echelon. Who would have thought the bots would be working as a team?
Yeah, yes, and causing a few issues for these three riders to get by. But now, this will be interesting. It doesn't look like Kay and Homer are going terribly hard, but maybe they're going to hold FTP. So it's going to be an effort for these other three riders to catch back on.
And something that's interesting to me is Pedro has opted to change to a tri-bike today. And I'm wondering if he's looking to get that lower rolling resistance, get the higher aero from that bike. And it seems to be paying off for him right now.
Yeah, that would be a good selection for Cade Fondo. Now, it becomes a little bit more interesting on Cadeville because you'll have to take the corners a little bit slower. And on Rocky Mountain, I would say that it's a very good choice as long as you're paying attention to the few corners that can catch you out on Rocky Mountain. Now, you rode these courses on Thursday, I believe, Mark. So you can tell us a little bit about what your impressions were.
I cooked myself, and what had happened is I did that big attack to chase, and then fell into the draft, and that's when your power drops off. And CadeSport is fantastic. It's got one of the best draft benefits I've seen, probably the best in a gaming platform, in a virtual cycling platform, because it actually lowers your chain resistance if you're on a smart trainer, which kind of feels somewhat similar to how it does outside. So you feel how do I explain this? You feel the lower chain resistance as opposed to feeling the lack of wind resistance. So it kind of feels comparative. But your watts will drop off, your power will drop off. And so when I needed to make an attack, that was when I had to go way above that and push very fast. So what riders are going to have to do here, and caders are going to have to do here, is they're really going to have to watch when they attack. If you're on a smart trainer, you've got it set to 100%, which you should do to be able to get the full draft benefit. You're also going to have to perhaps not attack on a climb if you're not a powerful climber, because even though you're looking at 1 to 5% on these climbs, it's deceptive if you're in a high tension gear, which, for an endurance race, maybe you want to be. And so, there's a lot of dynamics that you don't see as the audience that really come into play. And there are things where I played it a lot more cautiously than I have in previous endurance races that the audience would have seen me on. But I still cooked myself because I relied too much on the draft benefit and relied too much on attacks to chase. This is where Vibika and Timothy, who we're watching now, Vibika's in the best possible place to have the draft. Timothy is perhaps the only rider on planet Earth I've ever seen who can sprint and hold that as endurance. It's just insane. So Vibeke can just be sucked along in that draft benefit and be held with the team in contention there. And I mean, look at that. They've just eaten 10 seconds of a gap.
Timothy definitely starting to enter the hurt locker up at 187 equalized heart rate. Maximum is 200 that the game has ever seen for you. So he is definitely working hard. And Homer says, hey, we don't really want you to come back so easily. So Homer, and then Kay goes to the front. Definitely making Timothy work for this. So definitely putting some hurt in his legs. I think the beneficiary of all this is Pedro. He's just sat on, at the end of two people, sort of getting the maximum draft in a three-man draft area. So that sets up Pedro very well for the end of this race. Now, long way to go. We're only 5 kilometers in, 15 kilometers to go. But this is interesting. And Timothy says, hey, I'm going to just go right on by you guys. And heart rate up to 192. Timothy is highly motivated today. So very, very interesting tactics developing here.
What I really like with Timothy's tactic here is he's broken up that peloton. And I'm not sure if they realized it until it was too late. And then now he's got his classic technique in where he's beginning to break up the effort, which is fantastic to see. And Pedro, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so I think we were headed the same direction there, Mark. It'll be interesting to see how Pedro plays this because, in theory, he should be in a spot of bother here because he's got 2 teams. Both of those teams have, 2 people in this front group here, and so normally you would say he'd be the one sort of left out here at the end. But as these 2 teams go to fight each other and potentially send attacks up the road, he can always just follow. And at the end, he might actually have a bit of an advantage here being solo, which doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I kind of experienced that too. I had a bit of an advantage the other day, and I managed to get as high as 3rd before being pushed back to 5th, but that's certainly higher than I've been when I've started doing these races at like 10th and 11th. On this particular race, I should say, not overall. And so, yeah, there is a benefit to being solo if you can attach to a peloton and certainly not be quite at the back, but definitely not at the front, because at the front you're going to be cooking yourself. Homer can endure that. He's clearly an endurance rider, both by time in the saddle, but being able to hold against chain resistance too. So it's going to be really interesting to
hear. He's laying off the back, and whenever I get a strong rider laying off the back like Timothy is doing, I always have to wonder if they're building up to do an attack. Now, Timothy's got his heart rate back down to 175. He crosses the road, and maybe he is just trying to get his heart rate back under control. But boy, the hair on the back of my neck would be standing up if I was riding right now. And I would just be watching Timothy to see if there was a big burst, and he'd try and get a bit of a gap as he went by. So it'll be interesting to see if he launches off the back. He's a little too far back to be getting maximum draft benefit, and that's what would make me nervous. Now, if he gets right back on the wheels here, I might relax a little bit, but I'd still be keeping one eye on Timothy the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. He's, again, one of the few riders that if you put a notebook in front of him that had a checklist of 1 through 10 of sprints, he could just go, yep, check that one off, and just keep doing sprints and still have some left in the tank.
Yep, and on cue, like I said, this is why you have to keep. Now, maybe Timothy was just testing him a little bit there because he just did a little bit of a burst. And maybe he was responding to the commentary, not really trying to do that, but maybe catch some people out. Now, one of the things I love about Homer and Kay is that CCC, cool, calm, and collected, really sort of matches how they ride. They're like, yeah, you go do a sprint. We've got power, we've got endurance, and we'll just reel you back in a little bit later. Now, that works very well for them, but every now and then I think on Thursday they got caught out by Martin and Timothy doing an attack and then working together. So they've got to pay attention to that. But maybe Hive is setting up. Maybe it's going to be Vivica's day. She's had a lot of good races. Maybe she's well rested. She could be quite fresh because I haven't seen her racing recently. So there's a sort of a good thing to look at as we watch this. Now, Mark, tell me a little bit. There's in the virtual cycling community at the moment. There's a little bit of a flurry of talking around steering because there have been some new devices added. But tell me about your experiences with steering in CadeSport and what you think about it and how you look at it, and just talk to me a little bit about it.
I really like it. At first, it felt a little uncanny valley because you don't feel the motion that you do in the outdoors world, and that's no detriment of CadeSport. That's just virtual cycling at the moment. There's a device that's coming, which is getting a little bit off topic, but there's a device coming that looks like it's going to me, it looks a little bit promises, but let's see if there's a delivery kind of thing. But a device that looks like it will allow body leaning. Anyway, to get back on track, it takes a while to train your brain to think, I've got to do what I do in the outside world and brake before a corner. And that's kind of based more on the idea that most people now have disc brakes. And once I got used to that, it feels very, very intuitive to how it would in the real world. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it on courses like this where you don't have to really focus on braking so much. You just kind of steer if you really want to change your lane position, or if you just want to feel a steering motion of coming around one of those gentle curves. I use the Co-app, which is what you have a QR code for on the home screen of the game. You scan that, it goes to a web-based version, which is a lot less data heavy on your smartphone than an app. And it has a brake button, as you can see on screen there, which the longer you hold that, it graduates by a percentage. So it's similar to kind of dampening your brake levers in the outside world. But you want to do that before coming into a corner, like as though you've got disc brakes, which disc brakes are wonderful, but I personally don't get on with them so well because if you do brake into a corner as you're actually turning, you can run into accidentally locking your wheels. And that's what we see with some of the crashing dynamic in CadeSport, which is fantastic. So if you ask me, in the outside world, I do prefer a road bike with V-brakes because you kind of can go around the corner a little bit dampened on the brakes. But I also ride in winter in Canada on a fat bike, and it has solid tires, but even that won't stop you if you're on really bad ice. So I can say for sure on that I love disc brakes because you can stop on a dime if you have to. And I like to clip in as well and be clipless on my fat bike. And you might have to just jump off the bike in a very hairy situation. So disc brakes are fantastic for that.
Love this camera angle, by the way. Shout out to Damon, who is a camera operator, vMix operator, streamer extraordinaire today. But I love this angle. He does get some shots from the helicopter in CadeSport on our high definition pipeline that really are quite appealing. So shout out to him today. Interesting tactics. Everybody just kind of sitting in. I see that we've got Jennifer Garcia in the lobby, so she'll probably be joining us in the next race. I'm a little bit partial to her as she's my daughter. She's probably happy that she missed this race because I know she's just getting back on the bike. She's been busy as of late, and you know how sometimes exercise can sort of suffer when you're busy, and so she's getting back on the bike, and this would have been a hard one for her today, this one being the lengthy one. So it'll be interesting to see how she does on Cadeville, being out of practice on the corners. Now, let's talk a little bit about this braking subject as we're, as this pack is just sort of in neutral or in cruise mode. And as I say that, it's still in cruise mode. So let's talk a little bit about this steering and braking. We see Timothy steering. Now, I tend to use the autopilot with the steering I'll turn autopilot off on certain courses like Dark Matter Velo, because I think it gets in the way then, and I don't want to follow somebody automatically. I definitely want to keep the lane that I've chosen. But we see Timothy is the sort of rider who rides in control all the time. He's like, turn that dang autopilot thing off. I know better than it. And he's, that's certain. You can see that at times because he'll cross the road before other people getting set up for a corner. I think Timothy also does that because the autopilot likes apex corners, so it'll start on the outside and then cut into the apex and across it. That's how autopilot is designed. And I see Timothy trying to hug that inside line, and I think the reason he does that is because in CadeSport you can also save your skid, and so that gives him a little bit more time to react if he's going too fast into a corner. Hit the brakes, skid, burn off some of that speed, turn into the skid, and then the skid will stop just like it does outside. I won't get into all the physics because I'll probably bore everyone, but very realistic in terms of the physics. And then he can continue on. So that's how he plays it. I prefer to do the apexing. I can go a little bit faster that way through the corner. But Timothy is a great one to follow. Now, so there's that, that steering dynamic, and then I think at times people can find the braking. I don't know that they find the braking frustrating, but I think they can find that sort of crashing initially in the corner is very, very frustrating. And I certainly went through that. And my wife would say I was brain damaged because she would watch me and she would wonder why I would continue to crash over and over in some corners. And you just get excited and you're trying to follow somebody, and there's a whole bunch going on. And I think outdoors, we're used to not losing too much of our mental focus because if you go down, it's ugly, right? So you definitely want to avoid that. And in the virtual cycling arena, you don't lose your skin, you don't break any bones. So I think we lose a little bit of that focus. But one of the things I've been noticing in CadeSport is, man, are people getting good at going around these corners, right? The people who are playing more and more, they're really coming up with their skills in the corners, and it gives them a huge advantage because if you can go through these corners and not crash and or slow down too much, it really does save you a lot of energy. You get to coast through the corners and all of that. So sort of a dual-edged sword there. Mark, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I have begun to learn the dynamic of, because again, when I'm on a road bike, I ride V-brakes, but I've begun to learn that dynamic of now having that fat bike in winter in the outside world as well, learning to brake before the corner because of disc brakes. And it's very, very much the same thing here. And it's probably a good tactic on any bike in the real world to brake before you start to steer, and then you can build up momentum coming through the corner. That really works really well on these longer courses where the corners aren't so tight. If there is a crash dynamic on the course, which there isn't on this one, but on Cadeville, for instance, I've begun to learn through, first of all, doing them to begin with, and I'm sure as everyone has seen live on these races, that I just was crashing horrendously, like once every corner to begin with. But then I began to learn not to rely so much even on braking, to reach about halfway through a straight and then begin to freewheel. And then I kind of found that I can just dampen the brakes a little bit, like a tiny bit with that button, just maybe hit like 20% on that dampening, and then steer into the corner, and you get this really smooth trajectory out of the corner. So yeah, it's this process of like getting used to what it means to do a tight corner, and what it means to rely on that kind of handlebar mechanic rather than just always be body lean, and then when you get indoors, don't focus on steering at all, which is the pitfall I find of other virtual cycling platforms, is that it can unlearn you some of the skills for outside, especially if you have such a long winter as we do in Saskatchewan. But yeah, it's...
You mentioned you were on your fat tire Bart. Sorry to jump in there, Bart, but you talked about riding outdoors, and I was like, it's February in Canada. Like, what sort of clothing do you have to wear to get on your fat tire bike and ride outdoors? I would have to, be in a specialized suit with a heater, I think, because I'm used to, 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees centigrade in Tucson here, and so that just doesn't even sound even remotely appealing to me.
There are days, let me put it like that. You have times where I had one day where I misinterpreted the weather reading and looked at the forecast the night before, and I was like, oh, I've rode in minus 29 before and been fine. But that was minus 29 with the wind chill, and I made the mistake of reading the ambient temperature only. I get outside, I'm riding into the headwind, and I very quickly realize, oh wait, it's minus 40 with the wind chill. And it doesn't matter if that's Celsius or Fahrenheit, because that's where both scales meet. I was wearing merino wool liner gloves with these very thick polyester lined ski gloves over top, and it was just like I wasn't wearing any gloves at all. It was horrid. I just had to turn around and come home. But you can ride in minus 29 with wind chill, and it's that 11-degree difference apparently makes a world of difference. It's one of those things where you have thermal layers, your base layer is merino wool, and all of this. But if you don't move, you're going to be freezing cold. If you move enough and you get into a high enough gear that your chain tension is still there and you're pushing through it, so your heart rate goes up, you're going to be nice and warm. It's a strange feeling.
Yeah. So I'll comment on that later because I would recommend that maybe you see a mental health professional if you're riding outdoors at minus 40. But we'll talk a little bit about that. We've got a big huge attack off the front. Timothy, Vibeke, and Pedro follow. Again, CCC, calm, cool, and collected, saying, yeah, you guys go do that. We're going to take it a little bit easy off of here. So we'll see what CCC does here, if they respond, or if they're just like, hey, we'll back off a little bit. Nope, looks like Kay putting out a big effort here. So that's fantastic. I really think Kay is coming into her own. She rides a lot with Homer, but it looks like she wants to finish well on Cade Fondo, and she's going to also, looks like she's going to try and bring Homer back to the front. Maybe Homer's going to save the legs for Kay. Definitely look for Kay to sprint towards the end here. That would be my sense from Calm, Cool, and Collected. Now you've got Hive on the inside, as I talked about. Timothy, I think, putting out some big watts here, trying to keep CCC from coming back into the mix for the sprint. 3 kilometers to go, so still a ways. We're still a ways from the sprint, and it'll be interesting to see. Now, we had Timothy on the front, which might have been setting up Vibeke for the sprint, but now she comes to the front. And maybe, very interesting play there. A little bit of blocking by Timothy. Vibeke off the front, but she doesn't look to be making a huge effort. So here we've got blocking. We've got Pedro off to the side, sort of locking in Homer. But it all comes back together. Pedro being vigilant. It's going to be set up for a very interesting sprint, is my feel, with 2.3 kilometers to go.
Yeah, what's interesting here is they've clearly heard our commentary, Team Hive, and Vibeke is good at really strong small bursts of power, and then really good at holding endurance, holding against chain tension for the rest of the time. And they've been playing a tactic where Timothy's giving Vibeke a draft, and then once she's feeling rested enough, that's when he will just get out the way and let her have that burst of power, which is what we saw there. Perhaps even paying attention to how, I know that I'm not on any team when I'm racing, but maybe you saw it if you were watching. Vanessa and I worked a little bit together. Vanessa let me have a bit of a draft and then moved aside, and I just had a bit of an attack there, which certainly the other riders were aware of because we were in that chat audio together in the race.
Yeah.
So maybe paying a little bit of attention to
Vanessa was. Yeah, forgotten that Vanessa was in the race. I think she's about a year behind these guys. So I know Vanessa's been riding a lot this week, and she's ridden all of these long rides. And although Vanessa's fitness is coming up, I think she's worn her her legs to a frazzle, a nubble, and so she's taking it pretty easy in this one. But I would expect her to really start to shine in Cadeville, and then we'll see how her endurance holds up for the final race of the day on Rocky Mountain. One of my favorite courses. I really love Cyclogent City and Rocky Mountain because most of the tarmac is, you don't have to worry too much about the corners, but you do have to worry about a little bit. They can catch you out, so you do have to pay attention. So I think it's a nice balance, nice mix. Definitely things picking up here. We've got Timothy doing an attack, not a huge attack. And now with 0.8 kilometers to go, wow, that's an early sprint by Pedro. Can he hold it to the line? That'll be very interesting to see if he can hold it to the line. That's a really, really long sprint. We've got Timothy here answering the call, getting onto his wheel. Then he'll dive down. He'll rest for a bit. 0.5 kilometers to go. That's still a long sprint. I kind of favor Homer here, who saved a little bit of power, and this will be interesting. Okay, now Homer's got to put out the big sprint here. He's holding higher power. This will be very interesting. Can he get Timothy at the line? I think he can. Here goes Homer. Big sprint. Timothy answering with a big sprint. Okay, this is just slightly ahead. Oh, Homer tries to get the block. And he doesn't get the block, but he puts in some more power. Timothy's able to answer 2:02. I tell you what, pushed beyond his limit. Timothy obviously still developing his fitness on Cade Sport. Looked well rested. Homer very well rested there. This is a 3x in terms of points for the playlist. So some fantastic work there by Timothy. Obviously highly motivated. In terms of what was happening there. Homer was highly motivated. Pedro just getting caught out, but finishing off the podium. Some very interesting sprint dynamics there, Mark.
Yeah, that was fantastic to see. That was by a nose. So that was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, Homer's only an edge behind in the points as well. Kay, interestingly,
and Kay actually got
Pedro.
I'm sorry. So fantastic podium finish for Kay there as well. I think I missed that sprint, but she must have sprinted by Pedro. So very, very interesting development there.
Yeah, that was interesting because that was a peloton the whole way, and we had a pack that it was just nose to nose the entire way. Interesting to see those little tiny changes towards the end. Homer very much coming from the back of that little peloton, and which is not surprising. As I was saying in the race there, he's somebody who doesn't need the draft benefit. He can just hold against chain tension and just go and go and go.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Pedro, I love the try and get out from 0.8 kilometers. That's a difficult place. I would say the earliest you want to go is about 700 meters to go to the line. That's very, very difficult to do. 800 meters, nearly impossible to sort of maintain your sprint. So you're going to fade at the end. So you got to get a big gap, but it's hard at sort of that one, below 1 kilometer. It's sort of hard to catch people off guard in terms of your sprint. So sometimes you can sprint, I would say, at the 1.2 kilometer, let's say 1,200 meters to 1,500 meters, just above the 1 kilometer area. You might be able to catch some people by surprise, but then that's more of you got to be careful you don't sprint too hard to catch them by surprise. You got to get a gap, but then you got to hold it, and you got to hold it for something on the order over a minute, so that becomes difficult, right? So it's very, very interesting the play there. So maybe Pedro went just a little bit early in that race, but I like the fact that he was trying to catch them by surprise.
Yeah, that was promising. For me, I'm somebody that I'm only going to be able to benefit from a huge sprint, a huge attack like that, if I had the draft benefit immediately before it. And so Pedro went out from that peloton, and that's when you're really kind of cooking yourself against the air resistance.
Oh, and I thought we had Cadeville, and instead we've got a track that probably I don't see Homer here, so I wonder if he's had a mechanical getting into the next race, which is unfortunate because he was certainly right there in the running with Timothy. So we'll sort of wait to get a report back on that. But we do see Vanessa coming to the fore here. Looks like she's going to go for the win on a course that isn't going to really boil her legs. Now, this Cade Cart course does burn up your legs in one section. There's one section where you can go really quite hard for a while. So this is sort of a calm for most of the lap. And Vanessa overcooks it there. So that's going to hurt her advantage then to Timothy, I would think. But you've got Timothy and Pedro. Pedro says, no, there's no advantage for Timothy. I've got this. And Pedro's really been developing his skill. Each and every race, I see him getting better and better on the skill front. Looks like there was a little skid there that started by Kay, but she was able to bring it under control. Now, the Timothy and Pedro are going to come up to this sprint area. So they're going to go around a couple of tight corners, and then they're going to hit an area. Oh, and Pedro just cooked it a little bit early. But this is the area where Timothy is at, and you can see him putting out huge watts. We've got Kay in second position, and she can put out a whole bunch of watts now here as well. And Pedro's going to try and catch up with a big sprint. Kay's going to keep it under control here. And then the question becomes, when you start doing this, Mark, it's really easy to overcook it into these other corners. Now, the uphill here helps a little bit with you slowing down, but you've got to pay attention and get off the brakes before you hit the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you get back into that downhill, that's one that catches everybody else out by surprise. Or am I thinking of a different map? I believe there's a slight downhill on here, isn't there? Into a corner?
There is. We throw in. It's interesting because on CadeSport, because you're steering and you're braking, you've got to pay attention to the corner speeds. A little up, a little downhill into a corner, or a corner with a downhill, or the uphills. You have to manage those. You have to think about them. I sort of equate it to thinking about. If you're a golfer, being on different lies and how you're hitting the ball, makes golf a lot more complex. And the same is true here in CadeSport. You have to pay attention. Like, here's a great corner that has a downhill and a corner. Ooh, and you see Vivica starting the skid, but saving it there, probably just hitting the straight with the appropriate speed, and on she goes. But that shows you that she's maximizing her speed through that particular corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things where, when they start to drift like that, that can very quickly go awry for you. That's caught me out a lot of times, both on this one and that much more dramatic downhill into the corner on Cadeville. That one on Cadeville is particularly nasty.
Yeah, there are some little tricks, right, that the map designers, the route designers, the course designers, you will, at CadeSport, I think they have a little mischief in their heart. Oh, and Pedro goes down there, and so Vanessa using a corner caper at the same time. So big advantage to Vanessa here. Does she get the timing right? Can she make it through the next corner? No. Boy, she was trying to brake, but a little bit late. That'll give Pedro the ability to get back. So it'll be interesting to watch these two fight it out for second position. Oh, and as so often happens, you think you've got the mental under control, and we see Vanessa doing a huge sprint here in this area, and she just needs to keep the hammer down here if she can to try and close that gap up on Timothy. But what you see is you just get excited and you respond to something that's happening next to you, and before you know it, you're in the barriers and you've gone down.
Yeah, it really catches people out by surprise just from how tight these courses is. That one that caught Pedro out there was that really tight chicane where it's a left immediately into a right, and you can see that this course is very much based on motor racing. But what if we put this as a challenge to actual cyclists, and it will really get you.
Yeah, it's this is definitely a map for the technical people, and I'll tell you what, Vanessa is really putting the pressure on Timothy So this last lap will be very interesting, and you can see there she skids a little bit. She's definitely maximizing her speed coming out of the corner. Now she's 4 seconds down. That's going to be very, very hard to make up on Timothy, who's good technically. But you'll see, Vanessa's going to have to take some risks here around these corners and try and get the speed. Oh, Pedro says, "Wait a minute."
Oh, here comes Pedro.
Everybody, hold
using
the
both
phone.
power-ups.
Yeah, I've got power ups. Oh, if he'd only made that corner. He did get in front of Vanessa. Vanessa says, "Hey, no worries. I've done that. I knew what was going to happen to him." A great apex there by Vanessa going through the corner, and but Timothy has 7 seconds, so I think Timothy's really been pushing it through the corners. Probably been skidding, 3/4 of the way across the road, knowing Timothy. But masterclass that he can provide. He's definitely, look at that very tight corner, and he goes through there at speed and maintains his acceleration coming out of that. Boy, I would recommend a lot of riders just pay attention to how Timothy does it and try and emulate.
Yeah, and I'm noticing, I'm not sure if this is, I'm going to have to pay more attention to Timothy's tactics in these like go-kart courses, but essentially I'm not sure if he's just listened to my commentary and Vanessa as well, or if this is a tactic they've been doing for a while. But I noticed that after hearing about my freewheel tactic, they're doing a combination of both pedaling and braking, and then just freewheeling certain corners as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, as most people would do outdoors. You don't have to not pedal through a tight corner. You can develop some skills, but most cyclists sort of learn early on that if they're in a tight corner and they're pedaling, their pedal can catch the asphalt with the lean, and that usually ends badly. So sort of outdoors, you're in that mode where a tight corner, you just naturally don't pedal. You tend to put the weight on your outside pedal, sort of stand on that, and then just go through the corner. So that's what most people would end up doing outdoors. But virtual cycling platforms for a while, since you didn't even crash in corners and you don't need to brake, became sort of just pedal all the time. And then so I think what happens is, obviously we're a virtual cycling platform, so people come and they sort of carry that paradigm, but it's better for them to have that paradigm outdoors. Now, we saw Timothy come across the line, we saw Vanessa come across the line, and we'll see Pedro come across the line here. Ooh.
That was
almost
close.
Going down. Yeah, so I think he still would have been able to maintain the answer. Now we've got an interesting Vibeke and Kay. And Vibeke has a power-up, so probably we'll get beyond Kay for the finish. It'll be interesting to see here. Yep, that was well played.
This is the time to sprint.
Yep, this is going to be close.
1200 watts, that's powerful.
Yep, but Kay says, "I've got this," and holds it off. And then Kay makes it through the corner. That was awesome. So most people will crash in that corner after the finish. Kudos, Kay. She's like, "Nope, I'm treating this like real life. You don't want to go down anytime in real life." So that was a great bit of dynamic there.
So this is interesting. Normally the gap is a lot larger between first and second, but to get it down to just under 2 seconds, Vanessa did a stunning job. So this was more of like, you can see the riders getting their tactics down, and they're getting to a point where they can do it more as attack and chase, and focus a little bit less on having to really stress over playing the right tactics at the right moment.
Yes, so good development there. Unfortunate that Homer dropped out. That sort of gives Timothy a big advantage. But having said that, Kay is in the mix here in second. So looks like a high finish for Kay today. Pedro's very close, however. So this last race, it'll be interesting to watch Kay and Pedro. And then we'll see. I doubt that Timothy would fade so bad, but maybe he'll finish in last position, and Kay will win the day. But I think that's going to be difficult to pull off, especially with her teammate Homer having a mechanical and being out of the race. But it'll be interesting to see what Kay does on her own. What sort of tactics she's going to use. And then Pedro, it'll be interesting to see how Pedro reacts as well. And then I would imagine that Team Hive will try and get Vivica up the scoreboard in Rocky Mountains. So maybe they can finish like a 1-2 or a 1-3 in terms of the podium. So it'll be interesting to see what the dynamics are in the last race of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming into this final race, which goes back to that endurance and power, I kind of wanted to talk to you about something here, Frank, because what I didn't realize up until last night, actually, was that you, much like myself, have some endurance training, as you were the first person to get the virtual Everest, or the first recorded individual to get the virtual Everest. So this is kind of a thing where you've been racing for a while. How do you kind of win when you get back to this race that requires power? Well, that's where the training to be able to hold against lactate, the lactic acid, really comes into play. So what would you say is the best tactic for building up that endurance and being able to ride at power for time?
Just ride a lot. It's like everybody's, use your heart rate variability and, eat this or eat that, and get a power meter and, do all of this stuff. All of that's good. Nothing against all of that. But if you want to become, good at cycling, especially on the endurance front, just ride a lot. That's the first parameter for that. And then I think a lot of people use a lot of these other things to sort of maximize their efficiencies for the amount of time that they have, because developing endurance is quite time consuming. You've got to ride a lot of hours, but you really do. You're just building up that base. You probably want to ride a lot of hours, not at intensity, but just out there cruising. In terms of that, so we can certainly talk about that. At one time, I was, very fit. Rode about 25 hours a week on average, 6.5 hour days going up climbs, that sort of thing. And now I was always a sprinter, so I never really liked the climbs that much. So sort of an odd cat in terms of being an endurance rider, but also being a sprinter. So that made me a little bit of a different cat. But if I was able to stay on in these long rides, then obviously I had a big advantage at the end. So people would definitely try and drop me on climbs, which made climbs all the more fun. But that's what I would say. Just ride a lot. Don't overthink it, and certainly don't burn yourself up and get overly tired either. But that's one of the things that you just ride a lot. So kudos to like Homer and Kay. I think they have tremendous base. They ride a lot. Now they might get trapped a little bit in what we all get trapped on, and I certainly did this when I was riding a lot, is probably what you don't do is take enough rest or enough easy days. And that would be the classic mistake that would sort of hold you back long term. But if you ride a lot, your body acclimates, and that's basically what you want to do.
Yeah. For me, I did a 12-hour effort indoors on a virtual cycling platform, and I learned the meaning of pain in, not to be too graphic, but in certain positions that you sit on, certain places that you sit on, because a smart trainer doesn't move, it doesn't allow your bike to move like it does in the outdoor world. And I was doing more distance than climbing, so Everesting is climbing. And people are now coming up with an even crazier thing than Everesting, which is to achieve the climb equivalent of Mount Everest by doing repeated climbs. People are now coming up with trenching, which is the equivalent depth to height of Mariana's Trench, which is a lot bigger than Everest. And I don't know why people want to do that to themselves. But yeah,
I don't either.
For me,
I think everything, and what I would say is, yeah, you guys have at it. Do that as much as you want. I did it once. I don't ever need to do it again. I don't have that desire. I know there are some people who really get into that and do it multiple times. But no thanks. Yeah. And I've put a lot of hours in on the bike. Okay, big attack here by Vivica. So she's going off the front. As I said, this wouldn't surprise me at all. That Team Hive is going to try and move her up the scoreboard. We got double points in this race, so this would be a good one for Vivica to take the win on. And it looks like she's committed here. She's in the Hurt Locker at 194, equalized heart rate. So she's definitely starting to feel the burn in her legs.
Yeah, what's interesting here is Team Hive are clearly playing to the individual riders' personal, how do I describe this? Personal benefits in terms of their riding abilities. Personal abilities. Geez, I should have said that. I'm teaching myself the English language, I guess. But anyway, Vivica is more of a climber. She has the power to hold in her quads, and they've really gone for that. And she has opened up a huge gap through that climb, which is, they've really played to that benefit.
Back there. Yeah, and taking, look, she's at 202. So Team Hive, definitely highly motivated. Pedro says, hey, wait a minute. I'm not going to be caught out. He's actually even got a gap on Timothy, and Timothy looks maybe fading. Nope. Maybe taking a little bit of a rest and trying to sprint back on. And then Pedro dials it back down and tries to bring it back up as well. So Timothy marking. You still have a 5-second gap with Vivica off the front here. Looks like she's going strong. She's at 201. So, the whole body is on fire at that point, and she's suffering very, very well. That's what makes a great cyclist. Vanessa catching back on here, and I think she's going to go right on by. So this will be interesting. Okay. Weight lifted, power up here will help her with her acceleration. So she's going to accelerate hard here, and it looks like she's going to try and catch up to Vivica. I'm not sure Vivica is going to be too happy about that, but here we go. Is Vanessa going to be able to take the day? Vivica says, yeah, I've got that power up too, and I'm going to use it at the right spot. But interestingly, Vivica's got to be careful here because she's coming into some tight corners. She does slow down. And Vanessa says, I think I'm better at corners than you, so let me show you how that's done. So that was very, very interesting. Timothy's going to get back into the mix here. And Team Hive, I imagine, after the corners are all done, will look to work together. Everybody in the Hurt Locker of these three, but you've got Vanessa with a little bit of a gap.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is Vanessa seems to have been quite worn down, maybe a little bit tired on the first race, but it actually turns out that she was holding back for this final race, almost doing a Zeb tactic, where Zeb was like, oh, ich bin so müde, I'm so tired. But then he just comes along in the third race like, oh, ich bin stärker, I'm so strong, comes back, and so that's interesting to see.
Yeah, so, and sometimes, when you've been pressing it a bit and you're a little bit fatigued, sometimes your legs just end up coming to you. And maybe that's what's happening to Vanessa. The first race, you're tired, and then suddenly you're like, wow, my legs feel good. And Timothy's legs obviously feel pretty good here. So Timothy putting the hammer down. Now it'll be interesting to see. Pedro goes down. Unfortunate for Pedro. Kay goes down. Unfortunate for Kay because she was coming back. She used a power up, but hopefully her and Pedro will be able to work together. But now we've got Team Hive taking on the lone CadeSport rider, and I think this is a good tactic by Vanessa. So rather than wait for the teamwork to develop, and she says, okay, I'm going to put the hurt on you before you can put the hurt on me. This is a great tactic by the solo rider, and she had recovered quite well. So maybe she isn't as fatigued as we thought in terms of the heart rate. And so I think this is going to hurt. 2 kilometers to go. Whoa! And she almost overcooked it. Oh! And that cost Vivica to overcook it. And, that is so unfortunate, but it's a tactic that I've seen. I don't think Vanessa did that one on purpose this time. But it's a tactic that so often happens when you race into that corner and you break at the last moment, but you're putting the other people under pressure. They can respond, and then they go down. So that was very, very unfortunate for Vivica. Now Timothy, masterclass going through those corners. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've felt that in the races myself where you panic. You see somebody gaining a huge lead, well, not a lead, but they're beginning to break away. And they're beginning to get that breakaway, get that sprint distance. and you begin to panic, and then you don't even think about the corner. You just cook it, and then you realize too late that you've just punched it too hard through a corner.
Yeah, we see Vanessa definitely wants to take the win from Timothy. Oh, but Timothy, he's got a wind at your back power-up. I tell you, he counts the power-ups, he saves them, but there's still 1.2 kilometers to go. Vanessa putting out 1,000 watts. She's got heart rate room to give. Advantage Vanessa here, really putting the power in. Let's go, Vanessa. Can she get him at the line? Kilometer to go. This is going to hurt really, really bad. We see Timothy trying to hold his power, but boy, is he blowing up. It looks like he's blowing up. 194. He's not putting out much power. Looks like he's saving it for the sprint, but still 0.8 kilometers to go. Oh, this is going to be an interesting sprint.
I suspect that Timothy, this is one of the rare instances where we're seeing Timothy a little bit tired.
Yeah, now remember, he did help Vibeke. He went back to bring Vibeke on at the end, so I definitely think this is advantage Vanessa, who didn't put out much effort in the first race. But I think Timothy's going to give us a big sprint here. So if I was Vanessa, I'd be sprinting right now, as hard as I could possibly go. Longer sprint's going to favor her for sure.
Wait for 0.3, I would say. 0.3, and then go, because you can hold 0.3. Like most people who can't even sprint too well can hold 0.3.
Yeah, Timothy putting out huge watts there. Now, come on, Vanessa. All you got, all you got, all you got. Very, very close sprint. Come on, Vanessa. Oh, yes. This is going to hurt bad. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, my gosh. Oh,
wow. That was by like 2 centimeters.
Yeah, that let me tell you, that hurt both of those riders. Fantastic sprint. It looked to me like Timothy took the day. We'll wait for the results and see what that is. Oh, Vibeke and Kay sprinting. A lot of sprinting at the end of this race. Very, very close. Congratulations to Pedro on the 3rd place, rounding out the podium, and very nice sprint there at the end by Vibeke and Kay.
Look at that.
Yeah, 6/100ths of a second between Timothy and Vanessa. Fantastic sprint. That's one of those sprints where you wish they would come across tied, because both did a fabulous job. Pedro slotting in for 3rd, obviously paying attention. I saw that Vibeke went down, I think, again one more time. And that sort of happens, the domino effect. Once you go down, it's easy to keep going down because you're trying to press to get back. And that sort of makes things worse sometimes. And I think that's where Pedro was able to slip away. But then a great sprint by Vibeke and Kay, very close there as well. A couple of, tenths of a second on that one between the two. Nice sprint at the end there as well.
Oh, wow. Pedro kind of dethroning Kay.
Yeah, so that last race was interesting in that Pedro able to get over the top of Kay for 2nd position. Kay rounding out the podium, so that's great. Vibeke coming up into 4th position as well. Timothy misses the 200 total by just a hair. And I think he won all the races, so I think that was a hat trick for him. And so probably wasn't, I think 195 was probably the maximum points allowed. It just seems unfair by the people who set up the multipliers. It seems like he should be able to get to 200 on that. But great racing today by everybody.
Yeah, wonderful effort. All right, well, thanks for joining us, everyone. This has been a truly entertaining race. Nail-biter, as always, edge of your seat, and really fantastic effort. Anything you wanted to add before we go, Frank?
Nope. Everyone have a great day. Enjoy your weekend, and we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.